here. I am excited for our time today. We have a nice, small, intimate group here, and we also record these, so we will have people watching this at a later time when they're not at work and all of that fun stuff. So let me just introduce myself, tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do. As you see from this picture, this is some of the most important stuff that I do. I'm a husband and a father of my wife Jen and 2 young sons. I'm also the director for Life Model Works, which is previously was called Shepherd's House. I'm an ordained minister, I'm a leadership trainer, and a consultant for groups, churches, businesses. All that fun stuff about how to apply the 19 relational brain skills to your life, your family, your marriage, your work, your church, your school, and so forth. So I love what I do because it's a very relational work, and it's about joy, which is what we're going to talk about today. So the JOYStreams, this is basically like a webinar where today I'm going to do a lot more teaching than I would on some of our other programs. We also have events called roundtables, which are actually much more interactive, and it's not so much of me passing on a lot of information. It's just a group of people talking about how to apply joy to their life. And so sometimes we have guests on these JOYStreams. Today I'm my own guest here. I'm going to just talk to you about Thrive and about joy and basically how to sustain joy. So we'll try to save some time at the end for questions because I have a lot of good content to go through today. I'm very excited about this. I've never really taught this stuff before because we're going to focus on sustaining joy. Normally we talk about starting joy. But today we're actually going to shift a little bit and look at how do I sustain joy. And that'll make a little more sense as we go along. But I'm glad that you're here. We're going to have some fun today. So I oversee this thing called Thrive. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but Thrive is basically training. It's hands-on training. We designed, Dr. Jim Wilder and I designed Thrive because people were reading this book called Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, and they loved it. They said, this is great information. I've never looked at, at relationships this way, but how do I apply this to my life? How do I learn these skills? So Thrive was born out of that desire where people were just saying, hey, I want to learn these skills, both relationally with people, but also in my relationship with God. So what Thrive is it's 5 days of joy training, basically. It's hands-on training. You come with a bonded partner, a friend, a colleague, a coworker, prayer partner, spouse, somebody basically you have a relationship with already. And you learn these 19 skills that we'll talk a little bit about today. And these are all relational brain skills. And you also learn this thing we call a share manual. Which is how do I live with that awareness of God being with me? And so this is like the top-notch leadership training. It's restorative because it's joy-based, and joy simply means we're glad to be together. And so it's where you come and learn these skills. And the nice thing about learning new skills is we learn new skills best in a state of joy. So in other words, when you come to Thrive, we don't try to make you anxious. We don't try to put you in hopeless despair. None of those conditions would be very helpful for learning a new skill. But an environment where people are actually glad to be together and they have the awareness of God being with them, those are conditions for learning new skills. Now, I used to be a track runner. I love to run. I don't run track anymore, although I do some jogging these days. But back in my grade school and high school days, which was quite a number of years ago, I ran the 100-meter, the 200-meter, and even the 400-meter relay where you've got the baton and you have to run really, really fast and pass that baton off to somebody else. So one of the most obvious lessons about running, particularly short distance here, was you've got to start strong. So as soon as they would fire that little cap gun at the starting line, you run as hard as you can run with the end in sight, which is that finish line. But basically, those who won the race, not only did they start strong, but they actually were able to finish well. And what I found in running was, you know what, it's easy to start strong. Anybody can start strong, right? The hard part's finishing well. And so how do I sustain that energy, sustain my speed over time, depending on how long that race is? Now, if I was trying to run a mile or 5 mile or a marathon, you know what? It's not so important to start strong. It's important to finish well. I have to pace myself. But I've been in ministry now going on 20 years, and one of the very obvious things that I'm discovering working with ministries and leaders is basically finishing well is much more complicated than starting strong. A lot of us start strong in our careers, with our marriages, with our families. You know, we build all this wonderful joy, but how do I sustain that joy over time? That's where we're going to go today, is this whole concept of how do we sustain joy? Because starting joy, honestly, is not that hard. It can be intimidating, particularly if I haven't had a lot of joy in my life. But I find, you know, starting joy really isn't that hard. You know, you can just experience some appreciation. You can remember appreciation on your own. You can share appreciation with other people. You can go to the grocery store and receive a compliment about a hat, an outfit, you know, something, your personality. Just somebody's face lights up, an unexpected surprise in your day, some gratitude. A smile, an unexpected smile as well, some hugs. You know, these things all are ways of starting joy because joy is relational. So someone's face lights up to see you. And, you know, I love going into places and conveying joy and just watching people respond. Sometimes they don't quite know what to do with it, but other times, you know, everybody is wired for joy. So joy is something that we all need, much like breathing, all right? So starting joy is not hard. I've worked with, you know, trauma survivors for nearly 20 years. And even under the worst conditions that I've experienced, I can still see people over time start some joy. It's doable for all of us, regardless of what our lives have been like. Now, sustaining joy is going to be another thing altogether. But Ed Corey, Jim Wilder, Sheila Sutton, and myself, we wrote a book on this very topic, How Do I Start Joy? And the fun thing about this book, it's got all this wonderful content, but it also, we focused on giving people Bible studies and exercises so that they can actually start building some joy in their groups. So every chapter has some exercises and assessments so that I can actually start measuring how is my joy. So highly recommend this book. If you have not read this book, I think you'll find it very helpful to this whole process of starting joy. So, big question, the million-dollar question today. Once I start joy, how do I sustain it? You know, how do I sustain my joy for the long haul? What does that look like? So when I'm starting out my race, how do I continue to keep those joy levels high? Because what will happen is, when I fail to sustain my joy, then I easily become lost in resentment. You'll see resentment much like a weed popping up here, or pain starts to increase. Joy is what gives me strength to navigate pain that I feel, to manage what I feel. So an absence of joy means negative emotions and painful feelings begin to kind of take root and overwhelm me. Bitterness, very common. Someone who's very rigid, they're not flexible. You'll see often is very much a low joy issue. Addictions is a result, a catastrophic result of some low joy. And I love this acronym that Ed Corey named, BEEPS, which are behaviors, experiences, events, people, and substances that I rely on to help me better manage what I feel when those joy levels start to sink. So those are just a few of what we'll see when those joy levels start to drop. Not very fun. I know some of my most unpleasant times in my life were when my joy levels were very low. Something will always pop up when those joy levels sink. And marriages that do not sustain their joy, basically they suffer, and many of them drown. when we're no longer glad to be together, when our faces no longer light up, when we don't feel like we're the sparkle in one another's eyes, you can expect there to be some problems around the corner. And churches, I'm a pastor. I've pastored for nearly 10 years. And one of my observations with pastoring is when we don't corporately sustain our joy, what will happen is we become focused on rules and behavior instead of people and relationships, relationships with one another, relationships with God. And so churches that get low joy, you can expect they become quite rigid, and problems become bigger than people. And that really is a big problem when our problems, our differences become larger than those relationships. Those are red flags, my friends, that we don't want to see. Because what happens is relationships start to wither. We're designed for relationships. It's just not good for man to be alone. And that doesn't mean we all have to be married, but we are designed, we are wired for interactive relationships with each other. And I'd say with God as well. So when low joy starts to set in, we'll see a lot of people justifying themselves. Again, part of the rigid lack of flexibility, we might say, is in I justify myself. I justify my mistakes. I defend my inequities, we might say, my deformities, the things about me that actually aren't life-giving. Rather than humbly acknowledge them and work on those things, I'll just defend them. This is part of my turf, and I'm sorry that it bothers you, but this is just who I am. This is just the way that I am. I'm sorry that I scream at you, but you know what? You just got to deal with it, right? It's not fun to be on the receiving end of people who justify themselves. Churches lose their impact. You know, some will be very complacent, but what you'll see is comfort zones dominate how people relate, how people interact. Like everything's good as long as we're comfortable. But the moment we start to become uncomfortable because we have someone who can no longer, behave themselves in a way that we expect, or things aren't going our way, then you start to have some problems. So when we fiercely protect our comfort zones, it's actually a sign that some of my joy is dropping. Do you know anyone whose comfort zone dominates the landscape of their life or their interactions? I know I spent a big chunk of my life protecting my comfort zone without even realizing it. So that's no good. The goal actually is to build some joy when we start seeing these problems. Because we just don't attribute a low joy to problems that we have, whether it's in our families, our marriages, our churches, our schools, our workplace. I mean, you know it. I mean, studies consistently show when people are in this glad to be together state, people are actually going to function more at their potential. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to be more flexible. There's just all kinds of good stuff that happens when we are operating at the way that God created us to operate. We're just not designed to stay stuck in negative emotions for very long. 90 seconds is basically about the time frame there. After 90 seconds, the longer I'm stuck in a negative emotion, the weaker I become, and it starts to take a toll. And now when we think about this, wow, 90 seconds, you got to be kidding me. How can anyone, get back to joy in under 90 seconds? Well, when we have the brain skills that we're going to be talking about today, basically that's what your brain learns. How can I return to this glad to be together state even though I'm feeling quite miserable at this moment? And we learn these skills because people have the skills when they're interacting with us. But as we make one of the points we make in Joy Starts here is a lot of these relational skills that we train at Thrive are dropping out at a rapid rate. And so let's talk about these skills and talk about Thrive a little bit. So we've identified 19 skills, 19 relational brain skills. So we also call them gentle protector skills in Joy Starts here. These are skills ideally I would have learned about the first 3 years of my life. Now our brain's not wired that I can really remember what I was doing the first 3 years of life. So when I learn these skills, it just becomes part of the fabric of who I am. And because I have the skills, I just assume that everybody should have these skills as well. And when people don't have the skills, I think to myself, what's wrong with that person? Why can't they just choose to stop being so angry all the time? Why can't they just choose to stop this addictive behavior and these unhelpful cycles? Why can't they just get over it? Because if I have those skills, I don't actually have the memories of acquiring these skills. It's just part of the development that I had growing up because people had the skills. Now, if I don't have all these skills, then I might see how well you respond to upset or accusation or overwhelm, and I think to myself, wow, I wish I could do what you just did. I wish I was more like you in that way. But there's actually skills that we have to learn. And we've identified 19 of these skills. And so if you want joy skills but don't have them, I have to learn them. I can read about them. You can hear me talk about these skills all day long, but ultimately you need training to learn new skills. And so when I was running in track, in my mind, I wanted to be, a fast runner. But I could sit on the couch and think about being a fast runner. I could read about fast runners, right? I could even watch fast runners on the television set. But ultimately, I have to get out and practice. There's actually some skills that I have to learn and some endurance and stamina that I have to build in order to be an efficient, fast runner. So when we're talking about these skills today, we actually need training, which basically sets a lot of these resources that you'll hear about apart from a lot of options out there, because it's not a matter of just having information, which our society places a high value on good information. It's actually learning these skills and practicing these skills with other human beings. And so Thrive exists to restore these missing protector skills in our families, our leadership, teams, our churches, our schools, basically so that people can live according to their values, and as we would call it, so people can thrive. Jesus talked about abundant life, and there's something very appealing about abundant life, particularly if you haven't been living in what you would consider to be an abundant life. So part of what we're after here is you and I being who God's created us to be. We're no longer being robbed by our pain, by our upset, by our conflicts, but being who God's created us to be. And you and I can only pass on to our children, our families, our friends, and future generations the abilities that we've received and refined. The things that we've learned is what we can transmit. If I haven't learned to speak French, I can't teach you how to speak French. I actually need to have some experience with that language. And so what we've done is combine brain science, some of the best in brain science, with what we've, everything that we understand from God's way of life that we see unpacked in Scripture. And we've created this training. Literally every minute of Thrive is planned with joy and rest in mind and learning these skills. And this is how we change our generation. So you see me with my sons right here, for example. When Jim and I designed Thrive, I had to learn a lot of these skills myself. I grew up in a very loving family, but there were lacking skills. There were skills that just weren't there because my parents didn't have those skills. Their parents didn't have those skills. My great-grandparents didn't have these skills. But the moment you start learning these skills, you can pass them on. So both my wife and I, ironically, though we didn't grow up with these skills, most of them, we are now passing on these skills to our sons and our community. I mean, we're using these things left and right because we've been practicing. So that for me is pretty exciting, both as a minister, but as a father and as a husband. So there's 3 tracks to Thrive. Basically, the first track is we're building your joy. We're giving you lots of practice on how to build some joy and how to rest. Those are learned skills. And they sound so easy, but it actually does take some practice. And then in track 2, we introduce negative emotions, and we give you practice returning to joy from negative emotions. And then track 3, we give you lots and lots of practice using and learning solutions for the 5 levels of pain that the brain knows. So each year builds on your previous level of training. And some people, they'll attend track 1 year, they'll come back next year, do track 2. Some people, they'll do, if we have 2 events in the year, they'll do a track 1 and a track 2 in the same year. Some people, they just will attend as they can. Maybe they'll do track 1 this year, they'll come back in 2 years and do track 2. But basically, we want people learning these skills and practicing these skills. So Jen and I have created these skill guides that when you leave Thrive, you've got 52 weeks of exercises, joy exercises that you can do to continue your skill training. So let's look a little more at joy and return to joy. Since joy means being glad to be together, then returning to joy is what we need when something goes wrong, right? We live in a world where things will go wrong, as we see Peter writing in his book that expect fiery trials to show up at your doorstep. Don't be surprised when fiery trials show up. Why? Because the world that we live in is a fallen world. There will be things that go wrong. I can predict that after our time today, at some point this afternoon, things are going to go wrong, and I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to practice what I'm preaching here and practice getting back to joy. So once someone is upset with us, we need to know, how do I restore this relationship and so that we're both back to joy, and we can solve a problem together. If I can't do that, then problems become bigger than my relationships. So one of the ways I learned to do this as an adult is I practice with people who have the skills. So if you have the return to joy skill from anger, and you know how to get back to joy from anger, and I don't, then anytime I'm with you and I watch how you do that, my brain is basically internalizing that and going, oh, that's how you do it. And so the next time I'm angry, I'll actually have an example in my brain that will help me know how to respond when I feel angry. And I remember when I was first learning some of these skills, I just thought, you got to be kidding me. I've never been able to do this, and I really have no idea how to do this. But as I would start practicing these skills and practicing with other people who had the skills, the most amazing things started to take place. I noticed that I wasn't stuck in my anger as long, or I wasn't smothered in my shame as long. I started to notice my recovery time was faster and faster and faster. And pretty soon people would say, wow, Chris, you handled that really well. How did you do that? I would have lost it with that person. I thought, well, I don't know. I don't know how I did that. And it's one of the things that happens when you start learning these skills. Your brain says, I know what to do. And frequently, you just don't think about it. You do it. Otherwise, we'll just do what we've always done because our brain always uses the past to predict the future. So until we learn some of these new skills, we'll just do what we've always done, even if we don't like what we do. I frequently hear people, and I've said this to myself, say, wow, I'm becoming more like my parents every day. And that can be a good thing, and usually it's not always a good thing. But that's what happens. Our brain will pull up the files of how we've seen other people navigate conflicts and upsets, and we have to learn something new. We have to introduce some new files into our brain, so to speak. And so when you have the skill, you use the skill. There are no shortcuts. I wish there were shortcuts. Believe me, I do. I wish that I could show you a 3-minute video and you could learn all these 19 skills and life would be great. But that's just not how things work. I mean, I don't think it's any accident that Jesus spent, several years with the disciples before he left and left his spirit behind. Right? Very, very personal, interactive time of, the disciples would have watched Jesus under all kinds of conditions, when he was fatigued, when he's hungry, when he's accused, when he's angry, when he's sad, and those are the moments that we actually learn the most. So it is very much, there's just no shortcuts, unfortunately, as convenient as that would be. And so training is different. It's a different thing altogether than teaching. All right, but with that said, here's what I'm really wanting to get to today, and I've never taught this material before. I'm very excited to share this with you today. I've been working on a blog on this content, so you are the first to hear this information. I'm very excited to share this with you. We're going to talk about sustaining your joy, all right? Because one of the things that happens at Thrive, Thrive's a very high joy environment. People come to Thrive. They're on cloud 9. This is great. Wow, my life has been changed. I just want more of this. I don't want this week to end, people say. But the big question is, okay, now that I've built all of this wonderful joy, how do I keep this joy going when I go home? Because when I go home, that's where all my problems are waiting for me. They are just sitting there on the doorstep waiting for me to come home. So how do I sustain my joy? Because as I said, I think joy is pretty easy to start in the big picture. It does take some work, don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing at all, but in the big picture I find people can start joy. But how do we sustain it? One of the things we have to look at is how do I thaw a low joy environment? All right, I live in the Midwest here, and we have some pretty cold winters, and so thankfully we have a home with insulation. And so when my furnace kicks on, when it's 0 degrees outside, my furnace kicks on and I have heat, and I'm grateful for that. Now, if I had no insulation, let's just say drywall, you know what, that heat's not going to stay in my house. No matter how well that furnace works, the heat's just not going to stay in my house. I have to keep running that furnace, and it's just not going to be a very efficient plan, is it? So how do I thaw a low joy environment? We're going to look at that here today. We're going to look at that problem. How do I create community? Because a lot of the times people say, hey, you know what, I want to build joy, but I have no one to build joy with. That's a real problem. What do I do with that? Or how do I deal with distraction? You know, I've got my Facebook and Twitter, and I've got my phone and my computer. I've got movies to watch. I've got television shows every night. Come on, how am I supposed to build joy when I've got too much stuff going on here? Now I'm being a little sarcastic here, but these are real things, right? These are real things that hinder us. Some of these distractions are good. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I love these two little guys. But you know, how do I, at the end of the day, when my wife and I are exhausted, how do we sustain our joy, right? What would that look like under those kinds of conditions, or whatever conditions you have in your home? How do you do that? How does this joy translate under those conditions? And how do I engage my brain's approach system? My brain actually has a system that's in charge of how well I can stay engaged with you and approach you and build some joy. We'll look at that, because if that part of the brain's not working, I'm going to have a hard time sustaining joy. And then there's this other system in our brain that is in charge of reading things. How do I magnify this part of the brain that helps me really be able to engage interactively with you and be able to interpret what I see on your face and be able to have these mutually satisfying interactions? Because if I can't do that, it's going to be hard to build joy. And how do I deal with a disruption in the meaning-making system of my brain? Now, this is another system we're going to briefly look at today. And one of the things that happens is when I can't interpret events and make sense out of events, then what happens is I don't process events very well, and my life becomes sort of fragmented. We'll look at that a little more here. And how do I engage the executive system of my brain? This is a part of my brain that runs the whole show, and if there's a problem here, there's going to be a problem elsewhere, which is expressed relationally. So all of these are factors that, if they're working the way that God's designed them to work, you'll see joy levels start to not only grow, but stay. So when that furnace kicks on in my house, that heat will stay, so to speak. It won't just dissipate. It won't just disappear. It won't just vanish. And we want our joy to stay with us. We just don't want it to dissipate on us, do we? All right, so let's look at thawing a low joy environment. What does that look like? So first I want to talk about some resources, because at Life Model Works, we've worked really hard here to give you opportunities to interact with other people and to actually build and sustain your joy. And so there's a combination of resources I want to introduce, but there's also just some very practical things you can do. How do I keep my joy? How do I sustain my joy in a very cold environment? Well, that's one of the reasons we designed, we wrote the book, Joy Starts Here. There's lots of great information there, but ultimately the exercises are designed to help you start joy. And the group experience basically helps you to continue that joy, because joy is when we're glad to be together. Now, Connexus is a brilliant program designed by Ed Corey, Jim Wilder, and David Tackle. This is something that your community can run in the form of a small group. We've had 3 people go through Connexus. We've had hundreds of people go through classes in Connexus. So basically, as a next step after Joy Starts Here, this is the beauty of Connexus. It allows you to continue your momentum, we might say. And Jim Martini and Denny and I, we're part of these things I mentioned earlier called the roundtables. This is a great way to interact with other people who are on the same journey or a similar journey as you, and they're just trying to figure out this joy stuff. How does this work? How do I build joy? How do I hold on to my joy? And how do I keep that going? Now the Joy Starts Here website has an interactive online community, so we can actually also share notes with each other. This is what joy looked like today for me. I might share a little story that built some joy. There's lots of good groups and opportunities there at the website. I highly recommend you go there. Go to Joy Starts Here, and I think it's the community link, if I remember correctly, at the top of the website.
Yes.
All right. So here very practically, is that right, Denny, the community link?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so very basic principle here. A little bit of joy goes a long way. All right. So if I go to the grocery store and I have a delightful conversation with another father, just, you know, a 2-minute conversation, but it was enjoyable. You know what? I can think to myself, wow, what was satisfying about that? What did I enjoy or what did I not enjoy? You know, I start to think about those things. I actually spend a little time remembering it and even sharing it with other people. So when we're starting joy, it's something to savor. Jen and I recently went on a date night. We had one of the first date nights we've had since I can remember. It was great. And we went out to this local restaurant, and I enjoyed this Thai chicken wrap, all right? And so Jen and I were having some good interaction time over this wonderful meal, and we were able to just talk about what we were enjoying about our time together. The food was great, but even more than that, just being able to share what's special about this time that we have together, and to highlight what is it I've enjoyed from my week or from my day. And the nice thing about running, say, a Joy Starts Here group or getting other people on board in some capacity with me is you're going to have more momentum when other people share your vision and have the same values of, hey, I want us to build joy. And so joy begins to sink when we isolate. So the worst thing I can do is isolate or disconnect. You know, as much as I can help it, it's really important that I try to find other people, other friends, church friends, prayer partners, whoever it is, and start noticing it, because your brain without training will naturally want to focus on problems and pain. So at the end of my day, without training, my brain will say, well, you know what, this really stunk from my day, and here's what happened, and let me tell you this, and then I can think of my laundry list of all the things that went wrong. All right? Now there's a time to talk about those things, don't get me wrong, but the key here is actually being able to find what can I appreciate, what went right from my day, what can I appreciate from my day, what was good from my day. And the more that you do that, the more that your brain will actually start naturally focusing on the good stuff. So try it. Don't take my word for it. Try it yourself, because you know, before I had these skills, my brain just focused on problems and pain. So it's very nice to see that difference and to actually pass that on with other people. And face it, you know, we are wired for joy. The human brain is wired for joy. God designed us for joyful relationship with Him and with each other. And so people notice joy starters. They might say, what is it about you? I don't know why you're so happy, right? Now there's a big difference between joy and being happy, but people don't necessarily know what it is about you. They just know, wow, I like being around you, all right? And so that's a good way, you know, part of our testimony is just living what we preach, and then inviting other people to participate on this journey, and even find some opportunities like the Joy Starts Here, Connects Us, or maybe a group Coming to Thrive, where you can actually just further your training, we might say. So how do I create community? I love the analogy that Ed Corey and Jim Weiler use in the belonging module of Connects Us is, you know, how do I create belonging? What does that look like? Because without training, we'll naturally create rejection around us. So how do I learn to create some belonging? And as I say here, how do I create some community? You and I are the ones to start joy and to sustain joy. If I wait for somebody else just to drop a joy bucket into my lap, and you know, that's That's always good to pray about those things, but honestly, we are the ones to start joy. If I just wait for other people to do it, I'm just probably going to be disillusioned. So we are designed for joy. We're the ones to start joy. Whether I'm weak or strong doesn't matter. We can all start joy. It just takes some other people to walk with us. It just takes some practice. But we're wired for joy. So winning people with joy does fit with our design. And find two friends. If we can find two friends, they'll just start meeting for some joy exercises. That's a start. Pray together. I love this story about Hagar, an Egyptian woman in Scripture. We see her story in Genesis, where here was a woman. She was very, she was hurting, overwhelmed. She was on her own with a young child. She thought she was going to die of thirst because her and her son were out in the wilderness, out in the desert, no water in sight. Right? Their canister of water was dry. There was nothing there. God met her in her distress. He heard the child's crying. He met her and he opened her eyes and said, there's a well right there. There's a well over there. There's your water. Saved her life. Saved her son's life. So unless we actually start talking to God about these things, we don't know what resources are around us. We don't see those wells of water. We actually have to say, Lord, how do I create belonging? Help me to have those opportunities and to start practicing creating belonging, which is hard and intimidating, particularly when we've felt rejected. It can be scary. I really got to acknowledge that. Or if people haven't responded tenderly to my weaknesses in the past, I might feel vulnerable. And that's why it helps if I can have another friend or two, just other people who can actually walk with me and start practicing this. Now, if we're married, you know what? We might be, what tends to happen is one of the married couple, the bond there, one person will learn about joy and they'll be very excited about joy, and they'll even come to some of the training and they'll say, this is great, I want this. And the other partner is usually like, whoa, what is this here? I don't know about this stuff, what is this touchy-feely stuff, they might say, what's this all about? And the spouse who's actually tasted some joy is just so excited. They just want to share it with their partner. But if the partner's not on board because the partner hasn't tasted joy themselves, what'll happen is the partner who's had some joy will directly or indirectly use guilt as a motivator. Well, if you loved me, you would do this. You would come to thrive with me. Guilt's just not a good motivator. So one of the things I encourage, particularly for anybody who's married, if you don't have an encouraging partner quite yet, don't let that stop you. Continue building joy. Find some friends, safe friends. Keep up the momentum. And what I frequently hear from people is when they quit pressuring their partner will eventually come around and say, what is it about you? Something's changed in you. I don't know what it is, but you are different, and in a good way. I like it. So we kind of let our testimony speak for itself in terms of the changes as I start to build some joy. And there's no shortage of opportunities where you'll be able to practice your joy training with your partner. Jesus frequently encountered very low joy people, low joy environments, but he was himself in the middle of those. And the nice thing about joy is it spreads, it's contagious. And so it's fun to see how a little bit of joy can go a long way. And we always talk to Emmanuel about all of these things because what we see and what Emmanuel sees frequently are different. And so when I see a very hopeless situation, it's helpful to say, Lord, I don't know how you're going to be able to bring some joy into this environment, but you know what? This seems like just the kind of environment that you can work with. So Lord, what would you like me to know about this? How can I participate with you on this journey here of bringing joy into my family or my community, my church, my workplace, right? No shortage of opportunities there. All right, dealing with distraction. This is a real issue. Wow, distraction is a big one for many of us. What do we do with distraction? Well, one of the things, many times, not all the time, but a lot of the distractions we turn to are non-relational. particularly with technology. So one of the goals is how do I stay relational? If you've been through Thrive, if you've been through Connexus, if you've read Joy Starts Here, you'll learn that we actually have a relational brain circuit that is very much in charge of whether or not I am in a relational mode or out of relational mode. So it helps to start learning how do I stay in relational mode and appreciation, remembering the good stuff. Does God ever ask us to remember the good stuff, to be thankful? Have you ever read the Psalms? There's lots and lots of people remembering good stuff that helps them in some of their difficulties. So stay relational. That's fundamental step in dealing with distractions. Because when I'm tired, when I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to gravitate toward non-relational things. Recharge with rest. You know, the lack of rest, the lack of quieting is the greatest predictor of lifelong mental health. How well can I quiet? How well can I rest? There's a reason God gave people a Sabbath, right? He knows we need rest. Lack of rest is not good for you. So let's practice resting, quieting, and identify what are the obstacles that hinder you. You know, when am I vulnerable to distractions? And when I'm talking about distractions, it's basically anything that robs me from doing the things I really want and need to do. What are my values? You know, my value, for example, is to be a loving, patient husband, to be an available, loving, gentle father. You know, are there any things that I can predict that will hinder me from living out those values? All right, so when I'm tired after a long day, I'm home and I'm grumpy. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes or 5 minutes before you go in the house to quiet. You know, whatever those obstacles are, shine the flashlight on it, and that's a good thing to talk to Jesus about, okay? Or some friends, trusted friends as well. What do I need here? That's where accountability is helpful. You know, what is the legacy you want to have for your family, for your marriage, for your friends, for your community? And you know what? All of us could use some accountability. And I don't mean accountability like, you know, well, you're going to get in trouble if you don't do this. And when I find out you didn't do that, well, you're going to get a bad grade. No, it's basically like Moses having some help when his arms were tired, when Israel was fighting a fierce battle. And he needed some help. He needed some friends to hold up his arms because he just could not do it anymore. That's accountability in my mind. We have people who can encourage us along, could check in with us, pray for us. And we practice as a group. This is a common thread. You're going to hear from me. Find other people. Start practicing some of this stuff. Start praying together. Start building some joy. Identify what are the things that hinder my joy. Right? Is there anything I can do about this? You know, anything I can, how can I respond to those things that hinder my joy? Because basically, I'm as good as my ability to manage what I feel. All right? And joy gives me strength to better manage what I feel. When I can no longer manage what I feel, then problems will follow. All right, so engage the approach system of my brain. This is a part of the brain that provides me with motivation. All right, without this system working properly, joy is not going to start or be sustained. It's that simple. So one of the beautiful, wonderful things about what God's given us here for this part of our brain is how oxytocin helps to keep this part of our brain system working. Oxytocin is a neurotransmitter. It's a hormone that relieves our stress. Oxytocin lowers blood pressure. It reduces cortisol, which is the stress hormone. You know, cortisol is good for short times, but too much cortisol can have a negative effect in various ways on our body and our brain. Oxytocin improves digestion, calms the fight or flight structure in your brain, what's called the amygdala. All right, and oxytocin is what's also called an anxiolytic, which is a natural anxiety reducer. So oxytocin is a really, really exciting chemical that God's given us, and it's released on demand, basically. Assuming some of my early years, the more joyful my early years were, the more oxytocin receptors I have throughout my life. So those first months and actually first 3 years are crucial for how many oxytocin receptors I have. But that's another topic for another day. But oxytocin is released through worship, through singing. Did you ever see singing in Scripture? Did anybody sing? Do we sing at all? Yes. Singing is really good for you in so many ways. All right. That's another fun topic for another day. But worship. Worshiping, singing together releases oxytocin. Fellowship with other people, particularly ladies, you're extremely sensitive to oxytocin when you're interacting with other people, particularly other women. So women especially have this wonderful oxytocin charge that's released, which makes us feel grounded and calm and trusting and generous. Safe touch, all right? Usually about 10 minutes of even hugs or holding. 10 minutes for married couples, safe, obviously safe environment, but 10 minutes of skin-to-skin contact significantly increases oxytocin. So for those of you who are married, that's a very important, could be a helpful way to end your day, just some quieting together. And play. Play engages this brain system. So play is a good thing. Take some time to play and have fun. That'll actually engage the approach system of your brain, which is going to be important in keeping your joy levels high. Now there's this other little part of your brain I mentioned earlier called we refer to it as your reading system. And this is the brain system that all of us have, and ideally we would have been trained starting about 5 months of life. This is what helps us interpret what's happening in another person's mind. So I can't see you all right now, but let's say one of you were up all night and it was a bad night and you're very tired. Now if this system of my brain's working, I would look at you and I'd say, wow, you look really tired. Or, you know, are you okay? Was it a bad night? What's going on? This is also, you know, the part of my brain that say, hey, are you bored? Am I boring you? What's going on here? If it's working correctly, I am able to basically kind of put myself in your shoes and try to simulate what you might be feeling or thinking. If it's not working correctly, I can't figure out what's happening on your face. I'm just wrong, or I just don't see it. I don't see that you're overwhelmed. I don't see that you're struggling. You know, I don't pick up those cues, which kind of leaves you feeling maybe hurt or just very disconnected, or obviously you're not probably going to want to get close to me because I'm not picking up on those cues. So I can understand your perspective when this part of the brain's working. We also think about empathy. Empathy comes out of this, some of this brain system. Well, so when it's offline, we just feel disconnected. I'm probably overwhelming you in some way. I'm not tracking you very well, what you're saying, where you're going. There's going to be a lot of misunderstandings, or you're going to feel run over by me. You ever felt run over by somebody who's just pushing an agenda? Yeah, I bet you have, because when this part of the brain's not working, I'm just trying to push my agenda, and I really don't care that I'm running over you. Not very mutually satisfying. So we train this pretty heavily through Thrive, through Connexus. We introduce it in Joy Starts here as well. It's interactive nonverbal stories are one of the best ways to train the system. So when you like playing charades, have you ever played charades where you have to tell a story? There's actually, I don't remember the name of the show, but there is a television show where you always have some movie stars and then some stranger who's not a movie star on the team, and they have to basically kind of try to figure out different things. Well, they use words in a lot of them, I believe. But that's also when we try to convey something non-verbally, we're using this part of the brain, which practice makes it better. And so one of the ways we improve it besides stories is we just update this system in our brain by asking questions. You don't look well. Are you okay? You look tired. Are you tired? You know, we're trying to update our mind with what I see. So I would ask you. I would check that out, because my brain says, oh, she's tired. Oh, she's bored. But I don't know unless I ask you. And you might say, well, actually, I am tired. Or you might say, no, actually, I'm full. Or actually, I'm sick. I'm not feeling well. So we update by asking people. We don't have to assume. We just check it out. If you're worried somebody's mad at you, check it out. This is what this part of the brain will work with. And it'll work better when we do that. So we also have to deal with the disruption in the meaning-making system of our brain. And this is, you know, our brain has an amazing ability to find meaning and to create a narrative that's coherent about our days, our experiences, our events. And one sign of a trained brain is my ability to tell the stories in a coherent way. So tell me about your day. Oh, it was good. If you have teenagers, for example, right? Tell me about your day. Oh, it's fine. That's not a coherent narrative. No, tell me what you did. What was it like at school? What did you have for breakfast? What was the highlight from your day? What was bad about your day? What do you appreciate from your day? So I would learn to tell stories. And we all know people who are just natural storytellers. Their brain just naturally can tell these stories. But it is a learned skill. So we want to use enough words, include some of the feelings. What was I feeling? It's authentic. I'm showing the emotion on my face. And this actually takes a brain working together to pull it off. So it takes a little practice. And when it's not working together, I become rigid, or I shift into a blaming and shaming and justifying mentality. Flexibility is gone. Flexibility is in Hawaii somewhere sitting on the beach. It's not here with me. The mentality is it's me against the world, and everything's either black or white. All right? So trying to resolve disputes and conflicts when somebody's in this kind of a very non-relational moment is not going to be fun or easy. And so sometimes it's a result of traumas that need to be resolved, that I need to improve the system. A lot of times it's just learning to practice these stories, which is a great joy-building activity. Tell stories, share stories, give feedback. How did I do on this story? Did I convey the joy that I was feeling? Stories are just a fundamental part of the training that we offer because they're so good at not only transmitting new skills, but it's a great way for me to build some joy and to sustain my joy. So practice your stories. Tell somebody about your day, or highlight of your day. And the executive system of our brain, which is another system, is basically this is the last part of our brain to fully mature. Usually the early 20s is when this part of the brain actually is in fully bloomed, we might say. And this is a part of the brain that really super duper needs training, particularly when there's early life trauma and adversity. So this is a part of the brain that regulates my emotions, helps me be able to manage what I feel and calm down when I'm upset. And it helps me to mutually regulate our feelings so I can also stay connected with you as we quiet our upset. Otherwise I'll disconnect or I'll blame and shame and do some of those non-relational, unhelpful things. So this is a part of my brain when it's working. It keeps me internally synchronized, which means I'm externally synchronized. I'm able to be myself and not feel so overwhelmed. Have you ever tried to go to sleep and your mind just won't stop? Yeah, that's a sign the executive system's not fully doing what it needs to do in that particular moment because my mind won't stop. I'm anxious. I just keep going over and over and I'm stuck. It's like something's not fully processed here. And so this is the part of our brain that calms our emotions, helps us repair ruptures. We remember what's important in a moment. Instead of getting caught up when the problems become bigger than the relationships. We learn from experience with this part of the brain. We live according to our values, our faith, our commitments. We control our impulses and our cravings. We think through and we can even simulate consequences. So if I do this, here's what I can expect. If I say this to you, here's what I can predict, good or bad. And I can weigh negative outcomes. So there's times with my wife, I'm very thankful for this part of my brain. I think through before I might say something because I know how she might hear it. She might, how it's going to be received. If it's not working, I'll just blurt out whatever's in my mind without thinking about it. And that's no fun. So without it working, we can't really change behaviors or opinions very easily. And so we can practice reflection. Try to, in your mind, mentally redo a situation that was difficult for you. What would I do differently? You ever heard of the concept of the slogan that used to be out there, what would Jesus do? It's actually relying on this part of the brain to think through, wow, how would Jesus handle this? And it lets us practice changing viewpoints, and it helps us to quiet in good and bad times. So if you would like to learn how to do this stuff more, Thrive is around the corner. We have Thrive this summer, the 18th of July, the 14th through the 18th of July, here in East Peoria. 3 training tracks. Registration was supposed to close tomorrow. We decided to extend it. You're the first to know. We're extending it till sometime next week. I don't even think we've set the date because Jim Wilder is going to be with us at this event. And Jim hasn't been able to be with us at a Thrive in a very long time. So we're excited to have Jim with us. He's going to be around interacting and meeting people. So I'd love to see you there. we just set dates for next summer in Michigan, Grand Rapids, July 27th through the 31st. Would love to see you. If you can't make this July, join us in Michigan, beautiful Michigan, for next summer. You can learn more information at joystartshere.com or thrivetoday.org. Just a few quick thoughts here, since I'm running out of time. I want to recommend everybody send a leadership couple to Thrive. If you are involved in a community or church, if you can't make it, do what you can to try to get somebody from your community to come and learn these skills. People who run Connexus, we invite you. We'd love to have you at Thrive. But my recommendation, above all, is start with Joy Starts Here. Run the study, build some joy, follow up with Connexus, get Connexus going in your community. You can learn more about Connexus at joystartshere.com. Good stuff all the way around. If you want to learn more about joy, we're going to have roundtables coming up on the 17th of June, which is, what is that, next week already, next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and then July 1st. And you can join either one. We call them East Coast and West Coast, but feel free to jump in at whatever one works with your schedule. And Jim has a really good gym talk on volume 9 of the gym talks, which are MP3s with lots of great teaching on finishing well. Highly recommend that if that concept appeals to you. And so we've got lots of practical ways. I know our time is over, but I did want to at least give a couple minutes in case anybody had a question. You just drank from a fire hose, and I'm sorry, you just got a lot of information thrown at you. But my hope in doing this is that at least sparks some thoughts for you, or some new thoughts about what things that you can do to start joy and to sustain your joy. And some of this is very practical. I also tried to give you some very helpful resources that you can use. Anybody have a question before we end? Did something spark a thought or a question that you'd like a little more on? I'd love to give you the opportunity before we go our ways here.
Well, somebody was eager about Thrive, wondering if you'll ever bring Thrive to the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Glad you asked. Actually, there's a chance. We haven't confirmed it. We're waiting till after this July to see what the interest looks like, but there's a strong chance we're going to do a Thrive in Austin, Texas next year. Oh. If we do it, it would be in the spring, probably February, March. I think it's February is actually what we're looking at. Okay. It's not confirmed, so I don't want to get your hopes up too much, but we are looking at that possibility pretty strongly. We're also possibly, if anyone's married for that area, we're looking to possibly do a Joy Rekindled Marriage Weekend down in Austin as well. There is one scheduled in Plains, Texas, actually, for this fall. You can learn more about that on the Joy Starts Here or the Thrive Today website.
Yeah. That was the only question that was typed in earlier, but if anybody wants to raise their hand, I can unmute them. We technically are out of time, but we are okay to stay late a little bit. I did want to encourage you guys. There was a lot of information, and a lot of it was new, and it has been recorded, so you can re-listen to it and slow it down and take notes if you want to.
Process it in. That's a lot of information. Lord willing, we'll have a blog coming out fairly soon on some of this information. We're planning on this topic being our official applications event next year, which we call the annual gathering now. This will be the topic for our annual gathering next year. How do we sustain joy? Okay. So, so some of this stuff will be unpacked with presenters and all kinds of fun exercises and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Person who asked a question just left, so I will contact them offline, and I guess that's it for today. So it's a little after 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, so you guys have a great afternoon. Go out there and spread some joy.
Yes. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, everybody, for being with us.